So many questions that people ask will really be to do with a kind of temporary dislocation, if you will, from the foundations of spiritual life. And so the title of this talk would be Foundations, a continuation of previous talk. But of course, I also remember that we are proximate to the annual international celebration of yoga, Yoga Day, International Yoga Day. And I gave a talk down in Waterford. And so I may as well recap because that is really to do with fundamentals. So I'm going to posit 5 things, really, which constitute fundamentals. First of all, in order to understand some fundamental things about life, we can compare it to a building, I may have mentioned that before, where the foundation has to be solid. Now, that's true of organizations, but organizations are built by individuals, and our foundation must be solid. Now, in religious parlance, when we talk about foundation, we're talking about a series of teachings that we imbibed when we were very small, and because we are susceptible to it, because we have no way of judging for ourselves whether it's true or whether it's false, we carry this script with us, a kind of parent script which goes through, and if we're not careful, we want to ask the significant questions, probing questions of what, where, why, when, how, etc. But these are all scientific questions aimed at getting more information and knowledge about a subject. And that means getting more insight into it, understanding it at a deeper level. And when we have come to a foundational level, it is a generalized level. We have gone from the particular to the general. So modern science has done this very nicely. It is always looking for the fundamental particles, if you will. Even back to the time of Democritus, they were trying to do it. Vaisheshika, as a philosophy, was also interested in the tiniest fundamental aspects of material existence. And if it's true of material existence, it must be true of every other kind of existence. Typically, we tend to look at man and say, oh, there is man the physical, there's man the psychological, there's man the spiritual. Body, mind, and spirit. That's how it's normally classified. That's not a bad foundation, but if you take these as 3 equal dimensions, 3 equal angles of a triangle, you'll be doing an injustice. It's a wrong model. The model should be that the foundational thing is spirit. Spirit is the foundation. And from spirit and reflecting spirit will be the mind, the mental. And reflecting the mental will be the physical. There's a kind of hierarchy which is present. How do we establish such a thing? We establish such a thing by relentlessly inquiring about the nature of our own self. And so the Upanishads are very good at giving us lessons from different approaches about the ephemeral nature of each layer and how you have to go deeper and deeper, just like the woodcutter, in Ramakrishna's example, going into the forest, and he gathers wood and sells it, but a voice, an inner voice, is saying, go further, go further. And eventually he discovers a forest made from sandalwood, and then a mine full of silver and jewels, and so on and so forth. With each deeper investigation, more gets revealed and supplied and manifests as goodness. So it is the same with our inquiry. We start off then with this relentless inquiry along the model of others who have done it. Because many people have said, God exists, and talked about God, made songs about God, written copious literature about God, but who has ever seen God? That's the point. And if you claim, I have seen God, two things arise. What was the method you were using? And secondly, am I also have the capacity to do it? Is this available to me also? And so our fundamental, foundational resource would be this experience. And so we resort to the fundamental Upanishads, that portion of the Vedas, which we know is to do with knowledge. Knowledge meaning deep insight, discovery, that kind of knowledge. So we take this provisionally to be so, and we know it is so when we rationalize it, because plenty of rationale is inserted into it. For example, if we want to investigate the nature of anything, we have to go to the highest generalization, and that also represents the most profound and deepest unity, the most universal. It has happened with matter, it has happened with energy, and so it should happen also with all the whole universe and the whole of the mini-universe that we call man. And so we have the capacity to go inward, not just by logic, but by practice. So we take for granted that the discovery, the highest discovery, supplies us with a supreme principle, and that supreme principle exists in us and in all, and the discovery of this principle in us is the discovery of this principle everywhere. And so that is a second kind of principle that we take. The third thing is we need to know, well, we've been living in a familiar way, thinking of life in terms of individual embodiment, with memories and a history, born on such and such a date, these kinds of achievements. I went to school at this date, I got this degree, and I got this job, and all the rest of it. But fundamentally underneath everything must be a central purpose that creates a fulfillment. And the fulfillment is described in the Vedanta as freedom. Freedom from what? Freedom from all your difficulties. Freedom from all the pain. Freedom from this vacillation between happiness and sorrow. Freedom from slavery. After all, freedom means that. Freedom means freedom from slavery. But are we really enslaved? Do we feel enslaved? Perhaps not. But when you look at it carefully, you'll see we are absolutely enslaved, absolutely conditioned. Do you have any thoughts of your own? Well, some people may say, yes, I have thoughts of my own, but they are still within the confines of our imagination. They're still within the confines of our experience. They're still within the confines of measurements, space and time, if you will. So we are working within a conditioned area. When we talk about free will, for example, the simplest and most beautiful example, beautiful because of its simplicity, will be the 19th century Sri Ramakrishna, who says about free will, yes, it's like a calf or a cow tethered by a rope to a post. And it's allowed to wander, and it feels it has freedom, but it's always tethered to the post. It doesn't have any freedom. Freedom is an illusion. And so freedom of that kind is not available to us when the rope is no longer there. And the rope contains three strands. These we call gunas. Three ropes actually combined, intertwined. And so these three ropes confine us, condition us to being here. Then that means that with a wave of the hand, when we say all of this, the whole universe, our environment, our people and places and events and so on, all of these actually are mithya, they are all impermanent. They're all apparitional. They are fragments. We forget some fundamental principles that anything which is an aggregate cannot really be the reality in terms of permanency. These are all impermanent. We're looking for something fixed. When we find something fixed, not static, but fixed, that is a datum beyond which we can no longer go. The body vacillates, it changes. You must have noticed. Every day you might notice. You know that you are no longer 5 years old. We know from other people's experiences and from our observations that at some point in time we didn't exist in a crawling, walking, crying state. We were there in the womb. Before that, where were we? So that's a question that people have been puzzling over for a long time. But at each step of this growth, physical growth, but we cannot have physical growth without mental growth. There's emotional growth, there's intelligence growth. There is a way of evaluating, there is learning taking place at a voracious rate. After all, a child within, let's say, 2 years has learned a total, complete language. In adulthood, you try and learn a different language, you may struggle a little bit. You may have to go to a professional linguistics club or school. And people do that, and they study grammar and so on. But a baby doesn't study grammar. A baby just picks up words and understands what they mean. And if you're talking about language, birds communicate with each other. They have their language. Dolphins have their language. Every creature has their language. Cats have a language. Dogs have a language. Imagine these animals desperately trying to communicate with us. And we're looking blankly and talking in Italian, English, and what have you, all the languages we have learned. And we expect them to understand. So all of these various species will have their own inherent kind of intelligence and their own way of communicating, their own language. And a child has learned a whole new language within the space of 2 years. Then, of course, as we grow, we realize there is change. And change is not a comfortable thing. With the best will in the world, we don't like change. We resist it. Swami Vivekananda gives a beautifully graphic example about change. He says, with every new experience, we, as it were, put a new street, a new groove in the brain. And no wonder there's a resistance. A new way home. You imagine now, you have a fixed route home. Let's say you go to work and you come back in a fixed route, and then all of a sudden there's a detour. The first reaction may well be a little irritation, because all your routine has been upset. Change. We don't like change. And yet, the whole world is subject to change. Darwin's evolution was supposed to be registration of gradual change over slow periods of time. And we know this is not true. There are moments where there is no change whatsoever, and there is moments when there is erratic and immediate change, seemingly instant change, what we call punctuated equilibrium. So, change is the measure of something which we are familiar with and we accept as a changeless somehow. And therefore, that is our difficulty. We are stuck with this maya, this, we don't call it illusion, but this deception, as it were, by all the forces of nature that lead us to engage with nature as if it were real, with two genetic directives, powerful directives, the propagation of the species on the one hand, and streaming negative entropy on us, that is eating, drinking, anything that we are, that will help us to physically survive. And so we are attached to the physical, which changes and which will end. And we know it ends at some point, but we don't wish to face it necessarily. We think it's a tragedy. So it poses a number of fundamental questions and leads us then to a practice. And that practice has behind it two things. One is discernment. We have to practice discernment. Now, to the devotee of the impersonal, to the jnana yogi who follows a path of eliminating things that change, eliminating all the things which he deems, puts in a category of, this is really unreal. Therefore, this is impermanent. Impermanence equals unreality for my purposes. Then what is the real? By eliminating the so-called unreal, we are remaining with the real. So it's not that we eliminate and find a blank. We find the real as something which is there. And in order to do that, still we have to insert a feeling or insert a sense of a flow somewhere, a sense of a filling in of what we eliminated. And so this is the path of Jnana Yoga. But what about the devotee? They will also have discernment. And their discernment is of a different kind. What they will do is, they will, with a penetrating vision, fix their minds on the Lord of the universe present in the hearts of all. And that gives a beautiful joy. It gives a beautiful creativity, using the capacity also of imagination, penetrating the unreal, that is, the clothing of the body in the mind. And how will we do it? We will do it through discipline. Now, discipline is different from austerity. Discipline, by discipline, we really mean self-control. And the beautiful example contained in the Bhagavad Gita and the Katha Upanishad will be a chariot with so many horses, the senses going in different directions if we're careless. But there's a rein, a controlling link, and that is the intellect. And who is holding it? Who is directing the chariot from within? It is your immortal self. It is that fundamental supreme that is inside you and has a directorship. Come on, go left, go right. Make a decision. Now the Samkhyas give us a beautiful example, or they give a kind of step-by-step account of the efferent and afferent currents. So all the information from the external world, let's call it, are taken through the senses, physical senses. And they're all coordinated in the internal senses, the brain. And they're more than that, because we can imagine something and the brain has to correspond to that. So it's not the brain that's manufacturing it. So there's something called the mind. And the mind is like a reception office and the totality, if you will, of experience, minus the executive office role. That belongs to the intellect. That is a discernment. And along with that is a sense of I and ego that says I am the owner, I am the chariot driver. And with this combination, we have a story that is in one of the books on Patanjali Yoga Sutras, actually. So I'm sitting in a field, or somebody's sitting in a field, and something is coming closer to me, and I recognize it through my experience and my memory that it is a bull, and bulls are dangerous. So I report, there's a bull running. And then as the reporting process goes on, it comes to, it is running at me. And then, well, you better get out of the way. There's a tree nearby. A decision-making faculty is there. This is the faculty, the intellect, which either, if not controlled properly, enslaves us or liberates us. The liberating component will be to fill it with divine light. That is why The enlightened intellect is the Buddha, one of enlightened buddhi, intellect. And whatever happens at the micro level happens at the whole macro level too. So there is a universal buddhi also. Religion calls it God or cosmic mind. Philosophy calls it the golden womb, that from which everything comes, the creative component or principle, whose presence creates everything. And so love of that, embodied, imagined as a chosen ideal, that is being followed. Nature itself is an eternal run of these three forces, and it never ends. The play continues. We can call it a play, it's a drama. It manifests, it evolves, it returns to its origin, it goes out again. This is over eons and eons and eons of human time, a kind of cyclical model of the universe. But beyond that is the source. And that source is that supreme principle. And that is your own immortal self. These are the principles we have to be convinced of. Now, the practice of discernment is an ongoing thing. We have to constantly do it. And in the mental field, we have to constantly see which one of these binding elements are playing at the moment or occupying the field. Is it a component that has selfishness, egocentricity, self-interest involved? If so, this is not good for growth. It either makes us static, where we don't move, or puts us into regression. In order to get a progression, and we realize that the language is unsuitable ultimately, because progression simply means uncovering, that's all, what is already there. Evolution, after all, means unfolding, so unfolding the whole totality. And we have to be satisfied with small steps. There's a story, I suppose we have to say, once upon a time. Some ants came up to a mountain of sugar, and they had no idea that it was such a big thing. So they saw it and they thought, we can simply carry the whole thing away. They ate a few grains of it, and we filled, and then they took each one particle of a mountain of sugar. What impact will they make? Hardly anything. And as they went on their way, they thought, the next time we come back, we'll be able to carry away the whole mountain, just carry it back to our nest. So that's a difficulty, because our condition is such that very few of us have realized that supreme being as a totality. And many, like a mountain of sweetness, beautiful example. But many, unfortunately, will run away with the idea, yes, I know. I know that totality. I know that God. I know that reality. I know that supreme being. And so they think that they have fully known and fully enjoy a mystic union or a communion with that supreme, and they're fully realized. They have realized the infinite being. Now, the story is not meant to discourage, but it is simply meant to tell you that when you think that you have grasped something intellectually or any other limited way, you only tasted a small portion. In fact, the story goes on because the mountain of sugar seems all but carried home by the ant, because the ant cannot see the totality. For it's not filled and satisfied with his meal, so he knows he has to do more and more and more. And in this way, the self-deluded rationalist will be satisfied with his ounce of reason. And so he thinks he has comprehended the ultimate source, even if it's a materialist source. And he knows what the absolute is and what it's not. Well, We have to further discern, because discernment only gives us a means, an avenue, an opening to understand the totality. And it's not that I understand the totality as an object. That wouldn't be a totality. It is, I am the totality. That realization has to come. And people talk glibly of things like the infinite and the absolute and the unconditioned, as if they had any conception of it at all. And the great sage Sukadeva and also other holy sages were at best ants of a larger sort, that's all. So if we say that they could eat up 8 or 10 particles of the sugar, then that's a glory unto them. We have really said enough in their favor. Particles of this sugar, they've eaten more than the others. And so it's just absurd, of course, to say that the Supreme God, the Absolute, has been known and understood by anyone, as it is to say that a mountain of sugar has been carried home by some ants to be eaten up. And so the union between the undifferentiated, that is the universal soul, the Supreme, and the differentiated, that is the individual soul, is the goal of the Vedanta. That's the fundamental principle. And so it should be our goal. That means that is a foundational understanding. Now, in practical life, so-called, what happens? If we are to remember this as the obsessional thing, there was a very famous musician who passed on a couple of years ago, and he became one of the best in the field of his instrument playing, because he was absolutely obsessed with the instrument. From the age of, let's say, 5, he was obsessed with it and carried on. And he had no other real interest except the mastery of this instrument. And he became ranked as one of the top instrument players. But the dedication and the feeling that he put into it, he put every ounce of his personality into it. And that means then that he understood there was a purpose for him, just as an example. And so when we lapse in that idea, then we have gone off the rails, so to speak. What we have done is we have aimed to go to a certain destiny, and on the way been attracted by so many other pathways. So it's like going to a certain destiny, let us say Waterford, and then dropping off at this parkway and that parkway, and then going to see this fort and that fort, and this site and that site. And then after a while, going around with your friends and saying, where was I going? I've forgotten. Please remind me. And if your friends are not very helpful, you're stuck. We also don't know where you're going. You had to tell us. You never told us where you were going. We're just enjoying your company. So this forgetfulness has to be neutralized by constant remembrance, practicing the divine presence constantly. And that's another fundamental principle. So practice means steady practice, constant practice, continuous repetition of the holy name of the divine, continuous repetition of these ideas and principles. And practice means changing and directing the habit level. You have developed many, many habits, but some of these habits may be good and some may not be good. So we have to cultivate those habits which will deliver our freedom. That means we have to look at things in a different way. We have to revalue everything in front of us. We have to see the events of life as the comings and goings of waves. We know that this is summer. How do we know? Because this is the time of Wimbledon tennis. Whenever Wimbledon comes, we think of, oh, it must be summer. And imagine now playing this game of tennis where hundreds and thousands of people go and sit and book. Many people wanting the center court and other prominent places. They have some favorite places, favorite players they may want to go and see. So imagine now, you see, if the game you play was thoroughly disappointed, no surprises, no adventures, no breathtaking moments, no, clearness. One side hitting the ball, the other side not returning it. Game over in 5 minutes. What kind of game would that be? We shouldn't wish maybe this game to be over in 5 minutes because we cannot get our freedom in 5 minutes. We have to go through steady daily practice and be satisfied with small progressive steps, but at least they are progressive. And notice when the threat of regression is coming in and stop it at that point and reverse the trend and fill the mind with what we call sattvic principles of nobility and truth and goodness and harmony. Fill the mind with beauty. Fill the mind with happiness. And it's a no-brainer. If you're faced with the choice, will you fill your mind with joy and happiness, or will you fill it with dullness, recriminations, depression, blaming, fighting? You see, there's the choice. Why we don't make that choice is only because we often don't know we have that choice. That's probably the fundamental reason. We don't change course because we have forgotten the fundamentals of our direction. And that means that any activity and any thought which is not assisting this release, as it were, this uncovering of our own inherent nature that gives us this inherent freedom and immense blissful joy, should be discarded. Or we should learn to get around it and transform it into something that is positive. And we have all the equipment and tools to do it. And that means then that we can take life as a lila. That's part of our philosophy. The lila on the one side and the eternal, the nitya on the other side. Play the game. If life is a game, play it very well. These are repeated concepts, but we're talking about the fundamentals. And so we can take all the highfalutin philosophy and so on, but they're not necessarily the fundamentals. Whatever we do, however we walk, however we work, this can be a yoga. At the talk I gave yesterday in Waterford, I was pointing out the various dimensions of this thing called yoga, which is equilibrium of mind and skill in action. We cannot ignore every movement of our body as either our own or as not connected in any way with the divine. We cannot sit and think and ignore the fact that the flow of thought is divine grace flowing to us and should evoke a sense of gratitude. We have every moment where we can be filled with joy. And how do we avoid it? It is because we take life and the events of it in a serious way. Let us take, for example, the death of somebody, so-called. And people are attached to that person and go into a state of bereavement. Now, of course, we can't simply dismiss that and say, oh, this is unreal, the person hasn't really died. No, people are humanly missing the physical presence. So it evokes the highest kind of values within you of compassion. But secretly behind, yes, but Lord, you are playing this drama. And my role in the drama is to be a comforter for you. So all the time that has to be reinforced completely. We have to remind ourselves completely and totally. That means our prayer life has to be profound. At a retreat given maybe a week or two ago, and I asked somebody, what was the first thing that we should do when we sit for meditation? And the answer was from this person, oh, breathing. No, you'll be breathing anyway. Don't worry about breathing. You won't stop breathing, I can assure you. No, it is to feel the reality of the divine presence. Where you sit, you do that. And then every activity becomes a spiritual activity. Walking becomes a spiritual activity. Talking becomes a spiritual activity. Now you can understand that talking can be in the form of gossiping. That's not a spiritual activity. That is highly damaging. In fact, there's a story. There was a person who picked up some kind of gossip in a village, took it seriously, and shared this gossip with everybody in the village. Well, one person, and that leads to another person. By the time a week was over, the whole village was filled with the gossip about one woman. And that came to the ears of the woman herself. It was so unbearable that she left the village. And then this person who started the whole thing realized, oh, it wasn't true. How can I repair this? I don't even know where this woman stays. I should explain to her. Anyway, he came to know where the woman was, and he wondered, how will I approach this and change the course of this? And he knew there was a wise woman living somewhere in the village, and went to her. And she said, yes, okay. Well, go to the village where she stays and take the feathers of a chicken with you. He thought, that's a little odd. What will I do with that? And says, as you're walking on the path to the next village, you put all these feathers there. And when you come to the village, and before you meet the woman, you just retrace your footsteps. I want you to gather all the feathers up and bring them back to me. And he thought, what a strange thing. Anyway, this person has a great reputation, so must be some meaning in it. So he did that, carefully laying all the feathers out. When on return, he couldn't find one feather. They'd all been blown away by the wind. And he went to the woman and said, I've tried to carry out your instructions, but that's what happened. And she says, this is to teach you a very important lesson. Once the gossip is there, you can never recover anything from it. So damaging is it. And so we come to the discipline of speech, this tapasya of speech contained in the Bhagavad Gita. When we speak, why shouldn't we speak sweet words? In Patanjali Yoga Sutras, one discipline is be friendly to all. Holy Mother's exhortation. If you want peace of mind, don't find faults in others. And when we put it in our prayer that we repeat, at least in the ashram, and let's not accuse, let's not demand, let's not complain. Find faults with your own self. Don't criticize others. And make the whole world your own. Make every stranger feel at home. Spread the joy. Leave your encounter with others as a way of spreading joy. Be the promoter of smiles, shining faces, sparkling eyes. Why don't you do that, you see? That's a much better way. Swami Vivekananda, in his first steps of meditation, will say, we will soon realize that by making others happy, we make ourselves happy. The secret of making ourselves happy is to make others happy. This is a fundamental thing. Why should we spread the misery everywhere? If you're in depression, Swami Vivekananda says, lock yourself in your room. It's contagious. And when the whole thing is past, then come out. See, like that. So these are some of the foundational things that are simply repetitions and reminders I asked a group, see, how many times should we engage in spiritual practice of meditation, japa, prayer? There was an immediate answer from some of the participants on the retreat. Oh, twice a day. No, where did you get that idea? Oh, my teacher said twice a day. That's the minimum. It should be 5 times a day. 5 times a day is significant. The Muslims do it. 5 times a day they pray. The Christian liturgy breaks the day up into 5 parts. And we also have the opportunity to do that, to constantly tune our attention into the glory of the divine. Constantly we have to do it. That is called practice. So, twofold. One is discernment, called viveka, and from that comes vairagya, detachment. And we can do this in 2 ways, this discipline. The one is that we are controlling the mind in a systematic way. And the other one is to increase love of God. Fix your mind on me, says Krishna, constantly, and all the other things will fall away. There'd be an automatic discernment in this way. So we detach by attaching to God. We attach to the truth, and it begins with a yearning. A yearning, and there are some examples, a yearning that a miser has for his money, a yearning that a wife has for the husband, or the husband for the wife, a yearning for preservation of your own life. There are many examples. And so we have to develop this first and foremost, and that is foundational. So with these few words, we'll leave you. So Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.